The legislature sets its budgets through the Joint Finance Appropriations Committee, which consists of 10 members from the House and 10 from the Senate. Sometimes those conversations have been fraught over the years, but last week tensions boiled over in public. And since then, the committee has struggled to pass some budgets out of committee. Others have failed on the House floor. Meanwhile, confusion and disagreement about committee rules has halted some of the other meetings. On Thursday, I sat down with Senate Minority Leader Melissa Wintrow to discuss her concerns with the process and why she and her fellow Democratic colleague, Senator Janey Ward-Engelking, walked out of a budget meeting in protest earlier this week. Senator Wintrow, thank you so much for joining us. Can you walk me through why you and Senator Ward-Engelking walked out of the joint budget setting meeting on Wednesday?
Well, we just thought it was the prudent thing to do in a culture of folks who've been killing budgets just for the sport of killing them, I think. And the fact that we had some members missing that we knew would probably vote with us. If we didn't walk out and break quorum, we probably would have lost those budgets, which would have been pretty bad for the state as well as the state agencies.
And just to clarify, Senate Finance is a little bit different than the germane policy setting committees. If somebody is absent, it doesn't take away from the vote count. It counts as a no.
Well, that's really what's been under dispute this year, and I guess before I even got on JFAC in the last couple of years, is how we're voting. And it doesn't make a lot of sense to me that we would count members who aren't present as nay votes. We don't do that in any other committee, and it just doesn't make sense to me. But those folks weren't there, and those votes would have counted as no's, and the budgets would have sunk. So we had to, basically, in order to save in that culture and that climate, we had to leave to break quorum.
And for those who aren't familiar, breaking quorum means that you have to stop the meeting because you don't have enough members present.
Correct.
To conduct the meeting. At what point, though, does walking out, or in some cases with you and Senator Ward-Engelking voting no on some of these budgets, at what point does that add to the dysfunction?
Well, actually, I think we added to the function in that case because there are some members that just seem to say no to everything, and our obligation in the Constitution is to make sure we have a balanced budget. We have government agencies, programs, and services in statute for our state, and it's our obligation to come to the table and find an efficient and effective way to get to a good budget, and some members, in my estimation, just don't do that. And so in order for us to actually save some budgets because of those members that were already gone, that actually, I think, added to function and actually probably saved time later and paperwork.
You've been on the Joint Budget Setting Committee off and on over the years in the House and the Senate. One of the newer rules is that both the Senate side and the House side have to have a majority among their own members. You can't just have a majority of the 20 total members, but on each side you have to have at least 6. Do you have any concerns with that approach?
Well, my concern is just listening to you to describe it. I'm not sure if listeners are going to follow along. Typically in a committee, we all know, if you've watched the little video when you were a kid about how a law becomes a bill or not, you know that the majority of the people present in any committee when they vote win. And here we are trying to make, equations and procedures that are outside the bounds of common sense as well as what should be rule. And I think that's the problem, is that the chairs are operating under procedures that they've determined with their leadership, whoever that is. And so a few people now are creating procedures that really aren't in rule. And I think that's a problem. Rules are there for transparency, fairness, and predictability, so we know how to conduct business. And right now, it's very unsettling. We don't know. And so again, in the case that we had this last week, we thought we better just leave to stop things to make sure we can go forward in a more productive way.
You say leadership. This is the majority party that we're talking about, and the super majority party. Do you think the solution is making those rules set in stone or going back to the way things were before?
Well, I think at the very least you have to put the rules in stone. And that's what statute says, that the Joint Finance Committee will, in the interim, establish rules and vote on those so they know in a predictable fashion how to proceed and do business. And folks have been dragging their feet about doing that, and instead a handful of people at the top are just making decisions that most of us are following along with, when in reality, as you've heard Senator Cook say, The committee owns the rules. The committee should be voting on the rules and not just a couple of people calling the shots. And I think that's bad for government. And that's why people lose trust in government, quite frankly, is we need to instill trust and faith and not have unsettled ways that we do things so it's unpredictable. Because you see the eyeballs in the audience of the state agency directors and the people providing these services. They're hanging on every word we say because their livelihoods and the services they provide Idahoans are on the line. And instead, a lot of our members are just glued to their ideology and a stance instead of really, what is our job? And our job is to make sure government works to the people's favor.
And again, this is the majority party. These are the representatives and senators that the Idahoans in their districts sent to Boise to vote on their behalf. And they've been pretty open that they've been wanting to cut government. So is it really not working for the people when they're voting how they've said they're going to vote on these budgets?
Well, because here's what I think it is, we haven't represented the government in what it is right now. Everybody keeps talking about this bloated government. We have cinched the belt so tight we can't even find our belly button anymore. I served on that Finance and Appropriation Committee for 4 years, and Senator Groh and I used to sit across from each other. I just really enjoyed that. And we would always disagree on a few things because he kept cut. But I said, our state is growing. What business cuts when you have things growing? You invest, you find ways to look down the road. You don't just cut for cut's sake. And I think the most troubling thing I've seen this year is that people have been public about cutting initiatives that benefit the people, like housing, because they want to make room for income tax cuts. And people have said it out loud. That's not the way we budget. You know, you fix the roof before you go on vacation. And that's our responsibility. Now that's hard. Governing is hard. And what I see sometimes what my colleagues are doing is being stuck and kind of obsessed in these social issues. And I wonder, is it because they don't know how to govern or they don't want to govern? It's hard, and people will scrutinize your decisions. But we have to be up to that task, and we have to do it. And it is our job as legislators to educate our constituencies as well, and not just be afraid of doing things so we want to keep our job instead of doing our job. And I think that's what's happening here in JFAC, and we're seeing a big microscope on it.
Senate Minority Leader Melissa Wintrow, thank you so much for joining us.